We cannot talk about creating a sustainable circular economy without mentioning conscious consumerism. The conscious consumerism trend is here to stay. Startups are breaking their brains to deal with typical challenges such as limited budget, raising funds, and more. But how can they also start thinking about designing their product in a sustainable way? Let's see how the winner of the Rising Star of the Year by Business Women's Connection Scotland is solving that problem. Yes, my wonderful listeners, I'm talking about the one and only Jennifer Rao-Williams, founder and director of J-Rao, the Conscious Cosmetic Collective, the creator of many sustainable products, including CROWDSUD. What is CROWDSUD? Well, it's a 100% organic, vegan, and cruelty-free liquid hand soap for commercial and domestic use that was built using circular design principles. How did Jennifer do it? Let's find out in this episode. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naili Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live the burning question that you have on your journey to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Jennifer, welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. It's been such a long time coming, and I love all the amazing products that you have at J-Rao, and I just can't wait to dig into them and find out more about your journey because it's so relevant for right now, especially with the climate change and everything that we're going through at the moment.
Thank you, Naili. And it's really a lovely opportunity to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with your amazing podcast. It's exciting, and it's a really urgent experience, I think, for both manufacturers and consumers alike. So looking forward to the conversation. I feel like you've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yes, we do. Would you like to first let us know a little bit about what you do at J-Rao?
Yeah, certainly. So J-Rao is a conscious cosmetic collective. It started in 2017, which is 6 years ago this month. We launched in May, in spring, and it really was about creating alternative products to what is a really saturated market in the personal hygiene cosmetic space. So developing products for both the B2B, so for businesses, and for consumers in their home. We launched in Dundee, which is the city of discovery and the city of design, which really speaks to our ethos of being innovative and trying to create new, different ways of experiencing products. So that's a little bit about J-Rao. We have a line of 3 different products. One of them I'm really excited to talk to you today about, which is the CROWDSUD that you've mentioned. We launched initially with bathing salt range, and our kind of keystone product, which is taking a little bit longer to bring to market, is a shaving product, which I'm very excited about as well. So maybe that's another conversation for a future podcast.
Definitely. I would love to find out more once you're about to launch that product, because I think that's another one that I've been following and I'm quite excited about. But can you tell us a little bit more about CROWDSUD? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, certainly. So CROWDSUD is a play on words, and it speaks to the idea of crowdfunding. I'm really inspired by the power of crowdfunding for uniting kind of collective change. And also it speaks to my own experience as a pre-investment company that was seeking investment for the shaving product. I was going through a crowdfunding journey. So I was thinking about the power of the collective, and I think that's something that I'm really interested in. It's been an interest of mine for a long time, from studying my undergrad, where I looked at community regeneration, and I found out about really creative participatory methods. And I wanted to bring some of that thinking into the idea of experiencing a product. So CROWDSUD is this idea that many hands make impact work, and it's a refillable liquid organic soap. You did a great introduction in the beginning, thank you. And this idea is it's restorative in that, every bottle that shows up in a business space, in a home, has the potential to create change. So not only are the ingredients, vegan and organic, and attempts to be kind of hyper-localized in terms of the ingredients, so trying to source as much from the UK as possible. The ingredients are inspired by a British kind of like UK garden, but 10% of each sale will go to the Marine Conservation Society, which is a UK registered charity for seas full of life. Which is a really ambitious growth goal for a business that is, pre-investment, but I feel is really important to explore. So in our products, not only is it important to be sustainable, but we also want to go a bit further and think about ways to be restorative. So we take so much from our natural landscape in terms of manufacturing. Wouldn't it be nice if we could think about ways to give back to that space? So that's kind of like a little bit of an introduction there to CROWDSUD. It's very early days, but we have just launched this week, and we are rolling out to businesses in the nearby kind of region. The first bottle here is called Tay, and it's inspired by that connection with rivers. And the Tayside region, for anybody that's unfamiliar with Dundee, Scotland, it's known for its fruit growing, its fauna. And that shows up in the ingredient listing. So we have blackberry seed oil, geranium, and lavender. So it's very reflective in the product. So that's a little bit about CROWDSUD.
Oh, wow, that's great. I didn't know about the connection of the product, not just, obviously, I knew about it's locally sourced, but the strong connection it has with the region and what is, and how you are using that to kind of strengthen the product as well, which I think is brilliant. One of the things that you've mentioned, which I think is going to be very relevant for people right now, especially with the economic downturn and how hard it is for fundraising, you've done a successful round of crowdfunding. So can you share a little bit about your experience, right? For example, what you've learned, what worked and what doesn't work when you're putting together a crowdfunding campaign?
Oh my goodness, I had so many lessons, and a lot of those lessons were learned after launching, which is okay, because everything's an exercise. I had the benefit of speaking to a lot of people that had gone through crowdfunding in the Scottish startup ecosystem. So did my best to reach out and learn as much as I could. And I learned that it's important to have, probably around 80% of your pledges pre-agreed to help that kind of herd mentality of when you do launch, you want that feeling of the energy behind it. So probably doing as much work, if not more, before the crowdfund is live is really important. And we didn't reach our crowdfund target. It was ambitious, but we did get to a point where we have the funds to create a prototype, a really early version prototype. So not using the material that would be ideal, but enough to have a substantial actual example, which would be helpful for future, applications and things. So I think having a team around you, not necessarily a team of your own, but having support, camaraderie, people that you can lean on to help promote and amplify your message is super important. The importance of using social media and recognition. So one of the things that I did, and this connects with CROWDSUD, is I created a wall of impact to say thank you to the people that were sponsoring, either through amplifying the message and or through grants. So that was helpful because, I was reaching out to people in the Scottish ecosystem, and I was sharing about, what I was doing. So from an awareness point of view, it was actually a really powerful tool. I know that some people do use crowdfunding as a way of kind of communicating what they're doing, as opposed to generally just raising funds. So I learned a lot of lessons. I would definitely go back to crowdfunding in the future. And I see brands that are using crowdfunding, even though they are income generating, because it's a great way of building community as well. And feeling like your customers have a connection with your brand and your purpose and sharing in the journey. So lots of reasons for using crowdfunding. There's some wonderful resources available in the Scottish space in particular that I think would be possible to share as well. So people have passed things to me, and I'm happy to share some links.
Yeah, that would be very useful. I think this is a question that people do ask a lot, and I'm actually thinking about bringing someone on and really going deep into this discussion on crowdfunding. And thanks so much for sharing your advice here. And one of the things that is very interesting is this idea of, before you go live, make sure that you already have pledges, so that you have traction as quickly as possible. That is very important, and something that's sometimes overlooked. It's a bit like launching a product without doing any marketing behind it and expecting people to run through the door. And it's great to see that even on the crowdfunding aspect, that works as well. And the other things that you've mentioned, and I thought it would be great to highlight again, is how crowdfunding can be used for personal branding. and for branding of the company in terms of marketing. I speak to a lot of founders that struggle with the concept of, not having a big marketing budget, not being able to be seen out there. And again, I've seen your campaigns when you were crowdfunding, and all of the connection, the messagings, and everything. Yeah, I think you've done it superbly. So it's great to see how you've used crowdfunding for that purpose as well.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful, kind feedback. I think as well, one of the things that I learned from doing the crowdfunding campaign was not only are lots of people, generally speaking, happy to help you. So I had a lot of support in terms of videographers and people just promoting, but also being comfortable with critical feedback as well. So, what I have in text, what I have in video, looking back on it, I think there's a lot to be learned from other brands around, use more of the human, kind of comical. And I did try that. My humor is a little bit head on. So I think finding people that maybe can tell the message in a way that's a little bit more personal is also good. So drawing on your strengths, even if you are a single founder, you might not have to do everything on your own when it comes to a crowdfunding campaign. So leveraging your networks, is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if it's any consolation, when I first started with my podcast, and even just the idea of going on video used to scare the hell out of me. So, I wouldn't suggest people watch the first few videos when we launch. I mean,
has to happen.
It takes practice and time. But, I'm glad that you've mentioned crowdfunding, because I think this is really relevant for, the startup community. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, because we do mention a lot on circular economy, and you talk a lot about circular economy, but we're still at the point where people think a lot more about waste management, right? In terms of recycling. Is that your thoughts as well, or you think that we need to start thinking differently when we want to bring product out there as part of the circular economy?
Yeah, I think waste management is maybe part of the circular economy journey as well, but preference for me as a consumer and as a manufacturer is to think about this kind of closed system. If you have a product, what is the process of that product? Is it refillable, reusable? Will it last a lifetime? Those are the kind of things that I'm interested in, because we think about waste streams. There's so much resource that goes into managing a waste stream. And in the UK, in terms of governance, leadership, I am not wholly confident or feel comfortable about the idea of doing my job at a household level and being confident at a broader than regional, like the beyond local impacts of waste management. Who's to say what happens? And I think, the UK government are talking about banning exports of plastic recently. And I think, the amount of plastic waste that we export on a daily basis is so high. So I think there's so much more that we can do at a local individual level. As a manufacturer, thinking about really circular experiences of products. So all the products that we release are refillable. And I think that's where I have put my energy, is in ensuring that if you buy one of our products, you could imagine it in your home for a lifetime. And this idea of, there was a campaign last year, which connecting with a few other manufacturers in the area around Love Me Slowly, because it's an opposite feeling of fast fashion, which is kind of, single use, short-term kind of experiences of products. But this idea of buying a product that you can continue to reuse and refill. So it's that, for me, that's where I focus my energy in terms of the product experience from an aesthetic point of view as well, much more attractive. Because if it's a product that will go into the waste streams, there's maybe elements of it that are not necessary. So I think then it creates new challenges and opportunities to be more creative around the materiality of your products. So for us, we use glass, which has challenges. When we're getting it into businesses like hotels, it has challenges, but it's a much more durable, long-lasting, aesthetically enjoyable product to have. So my preference is focusing where possible on the circular economy.
But how do you, especially talk about those challenges when it comes to clients and customers? And there's a little bit of education that needs to go in there. But then how do you deal with some of the objections when they look at it and go like, oh, it's glass, and they're probably thinking about breakage and everything else that goes with that. But they also know the value that you're bringing. So how do you help them see what you're bringing and to drive the discussions?
Yeah, definitely lots of awareness raising. And I think it's listening as well, because I'm coming from my own perspective, and it's connecting with people that have great insights in this space. And there's some lighthouses that I look to in this refillable space to learn from. And it's also listening to the end consumer. So if it's a hotel space, what are their feelings around glass? I know glass is heavier, so there's additional kind of energy resources that go into transportation of glass. Glass, I don't think, is the final material for CROWDSUD. I think that I'm really interested in exploring other materials, but for now, it feels like an intervening kind of product, but it's not the final version. I think there's other materials to explore. But yeah, I think it's listening and understanding where the challenges are. And if it is around, safety, then absolutely understandable. Maybe there's, a plastic covering underneath that can go in that, you see on some products, they have like a bottom coating of rubber. Or is it using, the fittings that many places in hospitality have, these existing fittings that fit a 300 or a 500 ml size. So I feel that would be a safe option. Maybe the fact that they're using already plastic soap alternatives is not because of the safety thing, and maybe it's because of the cost. So lots of conversations still to have. But I do know that the glass is a safety concern, perhaps, for the bathroom space.
It's interesting to actually hear your thinking process, because what I feel, just from listening to you, that a lot of the decisions that you're very clear on your goals and making sure that you're building something that is sustainable and dealing with the challenge, but even whilst you're dealing with the challenge, how can you do that in a sustainable way? And people talk a lot about those value-based decisions that goes into making a product, and they think that that conflict and but not stopping there, using those questions to think, what is next? How can we get better, right? And yeah, I think it's great to be able to see that. Now, when you started thinking about your product and the development of the product, how did you do it? Do you work with a team, manufacturers? And because again, every single person that you interact with will bring on their ideas, but you need to make sure that your message and your goal is very clear to everybody that you work with.
Yeah, I think in the very beginning, before starting out on the journey, I thought about what would be like a worthwhile offering for J. Rao, because this is a very saturated space, the cosmetic personal hygiene space, and landing on kind of 3 kind of foundational blocks has helped me no end in thinking about what new products could look like. And the 3 blocks are around manufacturing products that are environmentally conscious as a standard, not as a strapline. So this is kind of, for me, thinking about at the very basic level, consumers should feel confident that our products are created really carefully with the environment in mind. And that means in our ingredients that we work with, when we began, we worked with an organic certification, UK certifiers, to ensure that our ingredients, our ways of manufacturing, our distribution, all of these things were like at the highest level possible. And that means we use organic, natural, vegan, unmodified, no parabens, no nasties, particularly like no micropollutants or microplastics, which I think 2017, at that time, there was lots in the news around cosmetics using these unhelpful things. So that was one of the inspirations actually to launching the first line, which was a range of bathing salts, 3 different kinds, which meant that we didn't include any ingredients that were kind of like non-soluble. And that was a big inspiration. So the bathing salts was the first thing. And then that opened up doors to thinking about refillability. So we have in our jars, we have these really generous sized jars, because it's important for people when they buy a product to buy one's well and have a really substantial size, because that's more sustainable than buying probably little pots. But when we created these kind of refillable pouches, we did a lot of research into these, finally finding a company in Amsterdam that could provide these 100% recycled pouches rather than biodegradable. And then the next product that we are looking to launch, which is taking a bit more time, is a shaving product. And that connects with this principle of being gender inclusive. So we make products for everybody, and we do not use gender profiling or categorization based on any characteristics, personal characteristics, because I think in a more contemporary brand, it's important, especially for a product that is speaking to your sensory experience, like bath salts or creams, perfumes. It speaks to personhood rather than how a person might identify. So that has helped me think about what would be the qualities of a shaving product if we no longer split the profiling to his and hers using very binary language. What about if we focus on a product that's considerate of skin and hair type? That would be a different experience entirely. So that has then kind of inspired the shaving product. And then, I think the third principle for us is using working with designers to think about circular economy, and that shows up probably more so in the shaving product, but it definitely comes through in these products because it has implications for the materials that we use. So thinking about glass, using an aluminium lid rather than a plastic lid. So not ever launching with plastic, which was, as a pre-invested startup, has much more of a higher cost. But for me, you lead with a stronger sustainable footing. And I think that's really important from building a credibility point of view. I think taking the time to lead with the best product possible is definitely worthwhile. So that's just a little bit about how I guess those three principles have influenced some of the products. And then once I have in mind the products, so we have the bath salts, we have the CROWDSUD, we have a shaving product, speaking to different audiences, different segments of society, all have different marketing around it. I then either work with a chemist, because for usable cosmetic products, you have to be certified, you have to ensure that there's a safety assessment done for all the products and all the variation of those products. And working with designers has been key, really important. That was one of the first things I did, and that was really valuable because I think it gives some distinction in our branding, which has been, we have lots of great feedback on. Other people to work with, really important for us, is IP, ensuring that each of our products has their own branding around it, their IP around it, which means that I just feel like they have their own personality, and then they speak to the market in different ways. And for a company that is still very early in the journey, connecting with wonderful IP support, especially in Scotland, there's just so much resource. They have been really, really valuable. So from the very beginning, having a really clear IP strategy. And I'm really fortunate. My sister heads up her own IP firm, so I have great guidance in that department.
Definitely helps.
Yeah, so those are just some of the people and ways in which products evolve.
I love, definitely, I think one of the comments is exactly what I was thinking about as well. It says, from Bridget, it says, I wish other company follow your concept. And that is true. There are so many, even high-end, lots of high-end products that don't even go as far as you've mentioned and taken the risks that you've taken to continue to be true to your design principles, your value-based decision at your core. As you've mentioned, we're not launching with a plastic cup, regardless of what it is, because it's really about our brand identity, and not further than that, which we really believe in, as a company. And you've done that, which I think is incredible. And the other thing I was also thinking about, which I think, for anyone who's listening to this episode, it doesn't matter what time of the day or the year. Yeah, something to add on your bucket list or your shopping list. For me, already thinking about birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas. I'm like, oh, all right, I'm sorted. Well, I'm just gonna go on the JLAO's website. I'm like, what do I need? And how can we use that as an opportunity to also share messages? So many people. So something as simple as hand soap, right? But how many times we just go and buy a new plastic one every 2 weeks or every month, right? You have one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom, and it adds up. What if you had a solution that you can use without kind of polluting even more and kind of embracing the circular economy? So that's fantastic. Now, one of the things that you've mentioned as you were describing the design principle, which again, thanks for that, because I think it's going to be really useful for the startups understanding how they can really ask those questions themselves for themselves. But one of the things that you've mentioned there was some of the challenges having to do that whilst you are still pre-investments. So do you want to expand a little bit on that? And I'm sure there are some potential personal conflicts or conflicts with advice from other people as well that must have been in your mind.
Yeah, some of the challenges. I think in the very beginning, I had the opportunity because I was fortunate to win a by design grant by Scottish Enterprise. So lots of grants, lots of competitions. Any way in which to raise kind of that seed money to get towards like a prototype has been like a big focus. And I'm really lucky. Like the university that I went to had a wonderful centre for entrepreneurship. So University of Dundee. So there was lots of opportunities to win grants, and that enabled me to work with a designer, a V&A watering designer, which would have really been out of my reach had I not had probably that grant from Scottish Enterprise. And that put me on a really good track because it gave me a point of distinction, I think, from what maybe you might have done if you think about going for a piece of artwork, off the shelf kind of experience that doesn't really do justice for the ingredients in this product. There's so much in intentional decisions around the ingredients. So sourcing salt from a cooperative in North France that uses traditional methods hundreds of years old, getting ingredients that you can source to the very supplier. There's lots of decisions that go into making a product in terms of a high quality, sustainable product. So then having the branding and having the design around that is in keeping, I think, with all the other decisions. But there are challenges. It creates lags. So the shaving product, for an example, it's almost there in terms of being really quite progressive. There's a few maybe design tweaks that will be interesting to explore. In terms of material, one of my goals is to use ocean recycled plastic or plastic destined for waste. And that has challenges that I experienced that I didn't foresee. I imagined that there's ocean recycled plastic and it's ready to be used, but actually there's minimum order quantity challenges. So that means if you are looking to buy that as a material, you have to be buying it in big bulks, and it's an experience that is in lots of things, from the jars that I buy to the bottles that I buy to the ingredients that I buy. Minimum order quantities is a thing, but there's also lots of opportunities, and taking some learning from other industries like the craft brewery industry. I learned a lot about cooperatives. I worked for a little while on sustainable entrepreneurship in Germany, and learned lots of things around how businesses as a collective manage to have and create those more sustainable choices when they come together. And I think there's lots of opportunities thinking about the material of ocean recycled plastic in that way. So finding a cooperative as a way of buying that material and using that material. So one of the challenges for the design is taking the long view. And I'm a little bit, I would say, pig-headed when it comes to getting a product out. I want it to be its best version. But maybe for more substantial products like the shaving product, that is a whole system. It's not just a razor, it's a whole kind of modular experience that has a different service to it as well. So it's a subscription-based model. But it might mean that there's more kind of intervening steps, that I get to a version of the product that is okay to release to the UK market. And then I kind of grow wings whilst in flight. So it's okay to have those steps. And it is a very different product compared to the bath salts and the soap. These are very quite manageable to do products. But this one is materially different, and it relies on other things like 3D injection molding and lots of other kind of technical processes and machinery that are out of my capabilities. So those are some of the challenges. But again, opportunities. I'm part of a community here in Scotland, which is all around education, engineering and development, which is a community of practice. And there's a whole load of people that are in this space that are just looking to be collaborative. So there's no shortage of answers. I think it's just the logic around how you approach it.
Yeah. And what you've said about, doing having to do things in steps, I think that is definitely part of the journey of a startups. If you can launch the full product, or especially if you have a clear idea, you can do that. But especially when we're talking about even software based products, first advice for me will always be try to put something out there and iterate, make it better over time. It's as you've said, during your journey of talking about all of the product that you've done, you're learning so much in the process. You're making so many connections and kind of growing as a brand, as a person, and in the industry. Yet at the same time, still always being quite true to the core. And I really love your approach to circular economy, because this is something that been talked about a lot, especially with some of the guests on the podcast. We had Andrew Brisbane from Alia. They run accelerator programs, and they really want to have their cohorts, to think about circularities. We had Jenny Irving from, can't remember, Student Investors. I can't remember, the company off the top of my head. But again, it's the same thing when you start thinking about the impact of circular economy. And even someone, I think Patrick Young is coming up with a platform, I think it's called Meat Free, to help people who are transitioning to plant-based products and helping them on their journey. And again, one of the biggest challenges that all of the people that are into this world have is, how do we stick to the design principles? How do we make that core in our platform? And again, yes, this is something that you've done brilliantly at Gero. One thing I also wanted to highlight, based on what you've said, was the slight conflict, especially when we come to talking about the consumers, right? And how can we share the story with the consumer so that they appreciate exactly what goes behind your product? Because I'm fascinated. The idea that you had to think about, where do I saw some material? I'll go to France for XYZ reasons, which I think, again, it does bring another aspects of the product, which is difficult to share with the customers. So how are you working or dealing with that aspect of pricing, and also sharing the stories for people who might just look at the price and says, no, but this is way beyond the price and based on what we're doing?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting from both a manufacturer and a consumer perspective. So I think I started JRAB because I was increasingly dissatisfied with what should be feel-good products, but they weren't, because you look at the packaging, you look at their ingredients, you look at the way they're marketed, they were limiting on their feel-good ability. And I think I'm perhaps on that part of the customer segment that is really aware of what I'm buying, and I'm quite keen on it, improving my awareness as a consumer. And as I've progressed, become more aware that the gap between what feels good has widened. So that was like the big driver behind creating an alternative to this market. And for me, one of the things I'm really interested in as a consumer is knowing about the impact of a product, from not only when we think about what has gone into it from like the supply chain, but like the post-use as well. And this idea of connecting with a charity like Marine Conservation Society is a really nice opportunity to think about the knowledge action gap as a consumer. So I think as a person that makes purchases, you have power, and you can choose when you make a purchase to reinforce unhelpful waste streams and extractive systems by thinking about some of the big kind of conglomerates out there, or you can support a brand that's trying to have an impact. And connecting the consumer to that product is around, I think, storytelling. And one of the things on the CROWDSUD is, I'll show you this, my terrible attempt at doing my own nails, is the blockchain would be a great place to get to, but in the here and now, it is a QR code where people can scan and they can see that with, this purchase, you've contributed to Marine Conservation Society, which has led to, something like, a river restoration project or a beach clean. So it's about connecting the user with the impact. And I guess it's changing that experience of consumption. So with consumption, there's an element of taking away, but what if we are just interacting with products? And it's around that interaction that creates the impact. So in the future, I would love to explore more digitally enabled platforms for continuing the conversation around impact stories. Every time you refill this bottle, how much plastic have you diverted from waste streams? if your typical use is, you know, one or two bottles every 3 months, that's an interesting thing to think about. But also, you know, how much have you contributed to XYZ charity? So I think that for me is one of the ways to build awareness, but also show that, you know, consumers are powerful people. And when you're conscious, and there is a level of responsibility and your ability, which, you know, very privileged. I have the opportunity to make choices around my consumption to a degree. And that's not a shared experience to everybody. Some people are choosing between, you know, food and fuel. So I think it's also about finding ways for people to experience products. And that, for me, I know there's a lot of really good organic brands that have a high price point. And I understand the reason for that because of the cost of manufacturing. But there's also an argument for having an accessible organic range. And this is what I wanted to contribute. I was going into a lot of hospitality spaces, especially with co-working. You know, you go into places that you might not normally go into, and you go into the bathrooms, and the experience as a consumer in a place where the menu is very reflective of the region. Then you go into the bathroom, and it's like, I know, a kind of a supermarket bought soap which isn't refillable and doesn't really do justice to either your hands because it's very dry and it has sulfates in it, or it could be better in terms of their ingredients. So I think that for me that's really important, is this experience of awareness and being able to respond to some of the challenges in the best way you can.
That's that really gave me quite a lot to think about, to be honest. I think one of the things I love about your approach is the QR codes and the storytelling, because that's the thing that I had actually in the back of my mind this morning, something that I wanted to talk a lot about, because it's part of, you know, changing, or not even changing, but educating people when it comes to the decision-making habits. And yes, it's a premium product. There's a lot of people do buy a premium product, but sometimes they don't even go as far as understanding where why it's at that price when it's organic. But, you know, we talked about this already. There are some premium products that don't even have any of that. They're just expensive, or they have a certain price, but they're not providing anything to the world. And one of the startups I spoke about, one of the things that they used to do was to kind of put a leaflet into the packaging. They reuse the packaging and they kind of describe how they build a product. And I love what you've done with the QR code, because that's even more interactive, as the information in the back can be changed and linked to a new campaign, new ideas, and just to really make the consumer part of the journey and part of the community. So if there's anyone out there thinking about, you know, how do we share our journey, I think, you know, that's brilliant. And I really wanted to highlight that. Some people think that we should just do a lot more, you know, social media, TikTok, Instagram, which I think, yes, it has a place. But when someone is in a shop, or they bought something online, how do we make sure that when they're, you know, looking at the packaging and really falling in love with that, there's an opportunity to tell the story so that they can actually appreciate what they've bought even more. Like, oh, wow, that this is how they've done it. This is all the effort they went through to make sure that we're building something that's great for the planet as well. So I think that I just wanted to say kudos to that and really highlight that as a strategy, because I know many startups are wondering how to deal with that problem, and this is something that you've tackled as well. And we've got we've got as well a couple of great messages for you and more cheers in terms of I agree with Jennifer with glass instead of plastic. As she reminded me, my mom told me that to use a glass bottle of my babies and not plastic ones. You see, that's starting a long time ago, and people are just catching up on that as well. So well done, not single use, and I would like that as well. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
but yes, that's brilliant, and I'm really happy that we kind of touch on that part, which a lot of people do struggle with. Now, let's talk a little bit about your journey as well as an entrepreneur. This is something that you've shared, just so many great advice, but I'd love to go deep into that. First of all, one of the things that, again, just to remind our listeners, those who are entrepreneurs, founders in that world, to really think a little bit about how you are creating your product. And this is something that, Jennifer, you have quite a product line, very clear idea of each one of them with very clear roadmap. I worked with a startup. I was an interim head of products. They brought me in because they had so many products, many different lines, but there was no clarity, in terms of how we're going to manufacture, how we're going to launch it to the market. What's the impact, and how to have clear brands between the products as well, which is something that I love with what you've created at J Rao as well. And in addition to that, the beautiful layer of the impact it has on the community. So do you want to share with us a little bit about your own entrepreneurship journey, and the highs and lows?
That's helpful. I was making notes there as you're talking, because I have a memory like a sieve. I would say, I think it was always under my nose, this effort to try and work with nature and bring a product to life. I have a big appreciation for fragrance and natural scent. So I was a child that deadheaded all the neighbors' flowers to try and make perfume, was never allowed in people's gardens. So I was always really connected with nature. And as I progressed from, eventually ended up in the university space, learning around like participation and around sustainability. I did a master's in sustainable development, and I think I did a PhD in geography. And a thread throughout all of my understanding is this desire to contribute to social justice and justice more widely. So connecting with the environment and finding creative ways to do that, and widening access and participation and inclusivity, and the experience and the feeling of what it means to be an impactful, helpful citizen of this planet. And that shows up not only as a consumer or as a manufacturer, but in lots of other roles that we have. And we don't partition ourselves by our titles. We are people, and I think we try and show up as well as we can in an authentic way. And that, when we are making choices around what we buy and what we put on our bodies, it probably shows up. So that has challenges if you are manufacturing, because it might mean that you pay maybe higher costs for certain things. In the space of cosmetics, it's very saturated. If you don't have a marketing budget, like you mentioned, what do? Do you connect with influencers that maybe are not aligned fully with the values that you're looking to support and amplify? So how do you do that? And I think it's about being creative and using the resources that you have, and not overlooking your network and the power of the social connectivity and the resources within those connections that are available to you, and asking for help. So during my PhD, I did an accelerator program at the Centre for Entrepreneurship at the University of Dundee, which was the first formal experience of learning about setting up a business. During my PhD, in my last year, I had no funding, so I set up my own cleaning company, which, looking back, was quite a heroic effort. So I had about 5 other people from the university, all students, all just trying to sweep the wool from the door, cleaning touristy places. And it was helpful because it showed me lots around what it meant to run a service-led business. And the confidence building was really helpful. And so not at all what I wanted to do in the long run, but really valuable experience. And then I thought, actually, I really am interested in products and contributing different products to this market. And there's so much scope in the cosmetic space. Like, there's so much untapped things to be doing. It's really exciting. And I think that's just caught my interest. It's an area of products that I enjoy as a consumer, and it's just, there's so much creativity in this space. So I think one of the challenges for that is, and something I experience, is you can be launching lots of products in a collective, but you might not get to a point of being, investable, because perhaps you're spreading yourself too thinly. So a little bit like an accordion, I have agitators and mentors. I'll go in like this, and I'll go like this, and I'll go like this, and look like this. So I think keeping a focus is really important, and having, like you say, a really good strategy and approach. So having accountability partners, being part of a community of people that are helpful to you. If you think you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, connect with those people that share those values and that have the same vision as you do in terms of getting your products to market and all the things that you care about. So I think for me, the challenges have been around resource, but then finding ways to be resourceful when there's no financial capital has helped. It might mean things are a bit slower, but it still feels like a good journey, and that's important. I think as a person trying to launch a business, it should feel good. I think when it stops feeling good, you maybe need to check in with people and reflect on what you're doing.
And there's also something to be said about building sustainable business rather than just rushing through just to be the next unicorn. This is a discussion that I had with one investor I spoke to this morning. This idea of, yes, we need to support startups to grow and provide, return on investment and all of that. But are we doing enough or do we have enough programs out there that's push for building something that's more sustainable? If investments is hard to get by, how do we encourage startups, or how do we help startups with this idea of bootstrapping and to getting to X amount of revenues, because that becomes even more attractive, and in fact it helps them to negotiate more. It kind of gives them a bit of a bigger land for negotiation with investors. And the other thing I mentioned on that as well, I was reading about, I think it's Elizabeth Holmes that starting her 10 years sentence for inflating or lying about the product that she doesn't have a startup, millions and billions of investments. And it reminds me of this idea, fake it until you make it. I'm going to write a post about actually fake it until you make it. But how much faking it are we doing, right? How much time are we taking to build something that is great for for the planet and not just for the profit aspect of it? So I think, yes, I definitely understand the challenges. The second thing that you've mentioned was the accordion effect. I definitely love that because I see that a lot when I work with startups. There's always this vision, the founders of the vision, many different product lines. I want to build this, and then I go like, okay, how do we do this? And we do this well, and then they want to do this, and I'm like, But yes, I think focus is really, really important. And saying that, I also sometimes get into that space because everybody I speak with is like, give me a new idea or things to do. Yes, I was telling you earlier yesterday, I was interviewed in Spanish on a live at the live events for entrepreneurs and for especially in Latin America and Spain. And it was a great discussion. And they're like, oh my God, I love what you do. And we've seen your podcast. And they asked me, would you like to work with us and create a podcast in Spanish? I'm like, great. But, it goes back to this effect. I'm like, yeah, it's great. But how do I do that? I'm not saying no, because knowing myself, I'm sure I'm going to say yes at some point. But how do I do that in a way that still maintain the focus? Because opportunities, there are plenty out there. But if you lose focus, you kind of lose your head. And I don't know if you actually feel that as well, being a creative person,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think if you are active in this space and you are cultivating a community, it's going to have these outcomes that you leverage your community, your networks, and you're not the only person doing it. And I think one of the things that I've learned from conversations recently is the desire to have a co-founder and or build a more stable team around me, because at the moment I work a lot with apprentices and contractors and those kinds of people, but wouldn't it be nice to have a little bit more of a solid team? And I think not doing everything on your own is important to help you with the focus. And also there are things that I'm not skilled at, so having somebody else do work on is going to be far more efficient, and it keeps you in your area of ikigai.
Definitely. And that's great advice for startups. Thanks, Jennifer, for this amazing discussion. We've covered so many topics, and I love how you always use examples in your own personal experience, because I think that's going to be very relevant for the startups. We've looked at crowdfunding, the design principles that goes into building a product for the circular economy, conscious consumerism. What does it actually mean? How do you stay true to your values, even when things are it might feel against you, but this is what I want to do for the planet, and so much more. So thanks for that. Before we go, definitely want you to show us your product, and if you can hold the CROWDSUD for a little bit longer so we can take a picture as well. Yes, brilliant. And let us know, how can we buy them?
It's available on the website, and I'll actually do a special code for those listening to the Mary Poppins of Startups, another little incentive as well. So available in 300, 500 and a 2.5 litre refill. So that's how you can find, and maybe I can share a link. It's jrao.com is the website.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And yes, to you, anyone listening now, do share this episode. We're gonna put the link of all of the links for the discount and absolutely everything into our website and also on YouTube where we store all of our podcasts. Do go and look out for it. And if you're wondering, should I really go for it? Yes, there is no questions asked. And at the end of the day, we're recording this in May. It doesn't matter when you're listening to it. If you are listening to it now, think about the wedding seasons and all of the amazing gifts that you can give to people. And if you're not listening to it in May, whatever it is, Christmas is probably coming up, or there's a birthday presents, and so many of the product that Jennifer is doing is also gender inclusive, right, and gender neutral. So that's great, because for me, I don't have to think too much. I should just buy it for absolutely everybody. So please do think a little bit about supporting. Sometimes I believe that as the consumers, we want the best. We want the fast fashion to stop being fast fashions, but yet when there are products out there that are produced for us and for the planet, we start thinking twice about whether to go for it. So this is definitely one of the key messages that I wanted from an audience perspective and not just a startup perspective. But thanks again, Jennifer. You've been great, and it's been amazing to have you. And I cannot wait for to see how things are going with your startup and all of the other amazing product that you are coming up with. And to the rest of the community, do please remember to follow Jennifer on LinkedIn. There's always a lot of great contents out there. And more importantly, we also have every month we have a tech and product discussion. So if you have any issues on the technology that you're using or on just anything tech related, especially if you're not a founder, and problem with people growing the company, thinking about closing an investment round, what does it mean, issues with your CTO, whatever it is, do drop by. We run them once a month. It's free, and you get to meet with other experts. And of course, if you are thinking in terms of manufacturing, packaging, and those kind of products, and you have a lot of questions for us, let us know. And I'm sure that I will bring on fantastic mentors like Jennifer to help you as well. In the meantime, do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.